at the border level. As Mommy said, this 2015 was a very important year. I would like to remind you that this week is a very important week as well, because we have many events of green diplomacy going on, like what we're celebrating here, and the International Fair of the Environment that we opened yesterday with the participation in Bogota.
And also the discussions that are taking place in the Talanoa dialogue in order to advance in the implementation of the Paris Agreement, and discussions held by leaders that will also take place during this week. And everything around relating climate, security, and development, how to foster an international agenda that may link all these topics together. In other words, the challenge that we have this first action line, including international agreements, as the great foundation we have to work on. The challenge now is how to ensure this cohesion, this coherence, how to bring together these three agendas in order to produce specific results. So yesterday we were discussing how to take this global agenda and its outcome towards victims, towards creating social changes, sustainable development, and seeking climate change along with sustainable development. I think this is where we can bring all these interesting experiences together, but it's also a great challenge, so we have to figure out a way to work in this regard. What have we been doing from the European Union? Well, on the one hand, the strategic approach around resilience is reflected in the action plan adopted in 2013. And what we did was to extract and build the experience in terms of crisis response and suggest specific actions on behalf of the European Union in order to support the most vulnerable populations before disaster risks. As Rafael was mentioning before me, it's about analyzing crisis and ensuring a consistent action with the different mechanisms that we have available when it comes to acting and addressing crisis. So, including the European Union, humanitarian aid, and cooperation for development. Also, from the European Union, we have an action plan for disaster risk reduction within the Sendai framework that leads this way, showing that, or how can the European Union support the Sendai framework. And we also spoke a lot about resilience, urban resilience policies. The plan assumes the need to reinforce the links between risk management, disaster risk management, adaptation of climate change, and policies and initiatives towards urban resilience. I'm not sure how much time you have left, but let me mention our programs, our flagship programs. First of all, we have Euroclima Plus. Euroclim, it's what I translate, and the main objective. Our purpose is to carry out this program as a star program, as a flagship program, and it's quite innovative, both in the conceptualization of sectors and the financing of different initiatives. One of the sectors is that of disaster risk reduction in droughts and floods. And along with this, we have considered all the global Sendai framework and the Paris Accord and the SDGs. This is okay. It has been a very rich summon. We have had 192 proposals, and this gives us a good sample as to identifying priorities and bottlenecks in the region in terms of disaster risk reduction. Once we study these proposals, we want to thoroughly analyze to what extent how have policies been there in order to address these main concerns, and how can we create a dynamic between the interested or the stakeholders when it comes to working with the European Union? How can we make sure these global agendas link together? Another good example from the European Union was our response towards the European or the United Nations call to rebuild the Caribbean. So this is an integration of international agendas, and there is a firm commitment of all the members of the European Union to work towards a resilient Caribbean. We have identified 49 specific actions worth of 260 plus euros. I wanted to tell you everything we do through our humanitarian agency for civil protection. ECHO, which is well known, seeks to work or address these bottlenecks. And some examples include a program we have, a 15 million euro program, and we aim to reinforce the rapid alert or early warning programs by empowering local actors, improving resilience before droughts and preparation for droughts by using a series of indicators, building on lessons learned from the El Niño phenomenon, the Maxio hurricane, and to promote preparedness or preparation actions. Also, we aim at facilitating the interconnection and supplementarity of these policies. In addition, as it was mentioned, the education of the military forces in order to provide humanitarian assistance during crises. Also, the integration, the engagement of the private sector, and it's a key component in any policy stated from administrations, and creating a public and private partnership or co-work, and finally institutionalize and capitalize methodologies and processes. That is all. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, embajadora.
Thank you, Ambassador. I wanted to add that the European Union is our top donor in ISDR, and many of the things we do, we could not be able to continue without the support we receive from the European Union, and especially the fact of making resilient cities is a very successful project that has achieved or has received much support from the European Union. Now, last but not least, Dr. Jose Luis Samaniego from the ECLAC, he will be presenting on this question. In your opinion, what are the challenges in terms of capacities in countries for the monitoring of advancement and the implementation of these agendas we are discussing? How can we ensure that the data collection and reporting on different instruments are consistent? what can the United Nations system do better in order to support member states and the region in achieving consistency or coherence of global agendas for disaster risk reduction, climate change, and SDGs? Dr. Samaniego, you have the floor. Thank you very much. This is a complex question. I need a timekeeper, please. I want to thank my colleagues from the UN and the ministry, the UN ISDR, the Ministry of Colombia, and all of you for your invitation. I would like to start by saying, or adding on to what Rafael mentioned, the reform of the United Nations has a rationale of responding to this agenda, which is not intended to be a list of objectives, but it intends to be a new way of solving a new pact for development. And the reform has the purpose of enabling the United Nations to stop thinking in silos, as many of the governments, because it's part of the expression of governments. We have children-related issues, fishing, climate change, and so on, but we don't have the habit of reflecting around development. So this is the challenge of the 2030 agenda, both for United Nations as well as for governments. Where are the key challenges? Well, we have a long tradition in terms of disaster management, but we have been adding to this the climate change agenda, which is clearly related in terms of adaptation and plans, especially with regards to adaptation. It has links to disaster risk reduction, and it tends towards mitigation, but it's difficult to make it interact with this agenda. Why? Because plans fail to be consolidated, because metrics are not shared, because we are not used to reasoning around where can I find the greatest number of benefits or co-benefits. And just to give a few examples, the 2030 agenda encourages us in Latin America not to grow, or we cannot grow with the conditions that we have, and that's the agenda. But at this pace, we tend to surpass the SDGs. Our emissions would grow at around 2%. So if we wanted to make the Latin American economy to fit the environmental budget of climate change, then we have to double. We would have to double the speed of decarbonization, and we would have to triple this rate. So we would have to prevent other ways of urbanization, mobility, use of materials, and building cities, and we're not thinking still at that scale. So we need to match the report, the TDP report, with this rate also, which is not systemized in our country. So we would have to be part of, or we have to bear this in mind. Also, in terms of adaptation, we have not agreed upon the adaptation metrics inside countries or in between countries. So I could not think of a way of locating ourselves between capabilities and vulnerabilities where we could find parts of the population and parts of the territory with high economic capacities with low vulnerability levels, because those are not a priority. Those that are priority are those with a high vulnerability and low capacities, and those, that quadrant, we should empty it in our regions and in our countries. But those metrics we have not agreed upon those metrics, so there's a long way to go in the regions, and we still have progress to achieve. There's another example pertaining Latin America. We know, because we have carried out those environmental impact and economic impact analysis, and in Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and North Argentina, we have some barren areas that will have to adapt to disasters, as we have seen in Peru and Chile, because there will be a higher frequency of floods than as compared to the past. So the options are there. How can we adapt there with high carbon solutions that are fit for certain types of companies, or solutions for native vegetation restoration along river banks that include municipal and community work and the engagement of other social actors that are low carbon in nature. So the agendas are still not cross-cutting. So we still have a way to go here. We have to identify metrics. We have to identify these cross-cutting solutions. And we are speaking about the universality of the agenda. If we speak about universality of the 2030 agenda, we have a lot of tasks. For example, we have information that is not part of official information in countries. As we were discussing, the Vice Minister of Cuba and myself, we were discussing how Cuba has adopted the information for the 21st century in terms of the sea level increase. And she says, yes, we have increased 6-point-something centimeters in sea level, so that's official information. But that information is available for all countries that have a coast in Latin America, but we have still not acted in this regard in terms of land zoning or the harmonization of the environmental impact assessment instruments, not only to have common norms, but also to avoid the problem of arbitration and investment that takes place in those coastal stretches. So if I ask a hotel chain to take into account the sea level increase, or they will tell me that I am crazy. But if we have a new standards in terms of operations, that's a standard. So we have those studies of environmental and economic impact studies and the projections for sea level increase that are available for all countries, and we could be using them in order to harmonize the instruments for decision-making processes in the long term. And we have the alternative, as we mentioned before, of harmonizing the requirement and imposing the assurance, at least of public buildings in risk areas, especially on the coast. That would have to create economies of scale in order to offer from the financial sector the possibility of adopting that type of insurances. So we still have problems around coordination and measurement. The ECLAC has studied how are we doing in terms of the 2030 agenda indicators, and many of these indicators are tier 3. They are not available. It's a long time before they will be available. They require different processes with the available instruments, and just a few of them are effectively available. So we need to reach agreements around, for example, what is our definition of cities in order to ground the data that localities will report nationally, and in order to make adaptation-related decisions in terms of disasters. And finally, as it happened with climate change for the 2030 agenda, there is an opportunity to take a proactive and positive outlook, meaning mitigation, adaptation, synergies with the 2030 agenda is offering additional development opportunities. So I need to find them. I must be able to find them, not only just a list of tasks, but the possibility of encouraging a new positive development agenda.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you very much, Dr. Samaniego. Now, I would like to open the debate for all of us, because you have been listening with attention. So I guess you may have some questions. So we'll be passing the microphone. If somebody has a question, please raise your hand. We will take 3 questions. If you have questions to one of the panel members, you may ask them. Directly Any questions?
Por ahí, la persona que está más a la
The person that's to the left,
izquierda y arriba,
high up.
¿sí?
¿Puedo
Por favor.
Buenos días, Jorge Ruiz de Guatemala, Alianza por la...
Jorge Ruiz from Guatemala, Alliance for Resilience, Wetlands International. My question is if we can integrate these global agendas through the national governments and moving towards local authorities, maybe how can we articulate these agendas? The government institutions have to see how we can put together all the institutions and these focal points working together so that we can actually articulate our agendas. Thank you very much.
Creo que la persona detrás
The person behind.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, Relinda Sosa from Peru, from the Guaidu Commission and Roots Peru. Along the same lines as the previous question, I wanted to know how can the global instances of United Nations contribute to the different levels, regional, national, in addition to coordinating the different stakeholders that have political and economic responsibilities from the entities where the policies are issued. How can they also include the civil society in a more horizontal way?
Importantes las conclusiones que vivimos hasta hace pocos segundos en esta segunda plenaria de este encuentro internacional. Unificar conceptos, estrategias, lo que ya esté funcionando que pueda ser aplicable a casos como el de Colombia. Vimos la exposición de nuestra viceministra de Ambiente en donde habló de la valoración que se debe hacer en el tema de medio ambiente, pero aplicado también a las reservas naturales, cómo esos recursos tan importantes para todos nosotros deben ser cuidados, no solamente por el hombre, directamente por los ciudadanos, sino también por los gobiernos, Carolina.
Así es, Juan, habló de la biodiversidad tan amplia que tenemos en Colombia y cómo esas gestiones a nivel de gestión del riesgo de desastres deben incluir este tema y todo el tema de ordenación del territorio para preservar el componente ambiental del país, pero en coherencia con todo el tema de gestión del riesgo de desastres. A nuestros televidentes que nos siguieron desde las 9 de la mañana, que les anunciamos que el ministro Murillo estaría con nosotros en esta plenaria, pues nos confirmaron sobre la marcha que no asistiría por temas de agenda con el señor presidente de la República y por eso nos estuvo acompañando la viceministra de Ambiente.
Claro que sí, recordarles que por eso el ministro hoy se encuentra en labores de gobierno, hoy se está haciendo el empalme con el nuevo presidente de la República, con el presidente electo Iván Duque, y pues son razones de fuerza mayor, pero aquí estuvo la viceministra y ya hizo su exposición. Televidentes, a ustedes muchas gracias por acompañarnos y nos vemos en las horas de la tarde con más de esta agenda informativa desde Cartagena.